Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on today's topical webinar. Now, we normally have a basic and advanced webinar for all of our labeling products about once a month here at TEKLYNX, and we recognize there's a lot to learn about in the labeling world. And because of this, we've launched a series of training webinars focused on specific topics that we expect most of our current users to face, or topics that we feel could greatly improve their current labeling process. Now, today's webinar is going to focus on one of our add-ons called Form Designer, as well as a built-in feature to the software called Form Editor. There is a bit of expected knowledge for our topical webinars. Pretty much everything we cover in the basic and advanced training webinars walks you through setting up the internal driver, setting up the label template, height, width, margins, things like that, getting objects onto the label, and we also go through all of the variables in the software. Now, for today's webinar, I'm going to be using CODESOFT. If you're a LABELVIEW user, the interface and steps are going to be identical. For our label matrix users, these functions unfortunately are not available. However, we still invite you to watch these webinars just so you can get a feel for what the other products are capable of. And luckily, upgrading from label matrix to LABELVIEW or CODESOFT is it's pretty easy as we have a built-in label converter. Now, just to introduce myself, my name is Robert Learman. I'm an enterprise support technician here at TEKLYNX. I worked here for just about over 10 years now. Just recently moved from Wisconsin to Arizona, and I can tell you I do not miss the snow. And over on the right there is our TEKLYNX mascot, Maya. Now, just a few housekeeping items to get out of the way before we get started. You've probably already noticed all the headsets, microphones, telephones. Those are muted on your end. It's done proactively. Just when we get quite a few individuals in these webinars, the lines can get a bit cluttered. So as I said, we do mute those. We do, however, have some live moderators on our end. So all you have to do is expand the questions section in the GoToWebinar console, type in your question. They will see it pop up on their end, and they will be able to address that live. So now that we have the housekeeping items in place, let's move into the agenda for today. We're going to be going over the benefits of using forms to print labels, how it can really improve your printing process. We're going to take a look at the similarities and differences between Form Designer and Form Editor. We'll briefly look at the enhancements in LABELVIEW 2019 and CODESOFT 2019 for Form Designer and Form Editor. We're going to take a look at designing your ideal printing process. We'll slide into a live training demo just to show you what it looks like in Form Designer and Form Editor. And then lastly, we'll have our question and answers. Now, the benefits of using forms, first and possibly most important, is that using forms can really reduce labeling errors. And depending on the industry, those can be pretty costly. The label design itself cannot be changed. Data entry is limited to what is allowed in the form, and the formatter template is essentially restricted. It's really all possible because the end user is not even printing from the design software, at least with the form editor. They're printing from a form that your administrator has designed for one purpose, and that's to print labels. Forms can enforce user roles. As I mentioned earlier, print users cannot edit label designs. They're not launching LABELVIEW or CODESOFT. They're not going to file, then clicking print. They're launching a form that allows them tasks that have been built into it. Maybe they can switch between printers, different labels, even database connections. Really, the sky's the limit as these forms are really customizable. And lastly, this can save time. Rather than having many individual static label templates, you can simply have a few templates to serve your needs. You can streamline all of the data that is entered into those customized forms as they're built for your specific labeling needs. Now, it's really hard to peg down if Form Designer and Form Editor are more similar or different. With both, you can enter data at print time, as I've already stated. Print users cannot alter those label templates, and it's a similar design experience for whoever is creating these forms. I like to say it's like VB without the actual scripting. And in fact, it's a bigger and bigger trend in our industry to help our end users move sort of away from having the need to have costly developers on their end, as you do not need to have developing experience to create these forms. One of the bigger differences is that Form Designer has a counterpart called Form Viewer. So there are two separate applications, Form Viewer being used by the print user as you're viewing the forms, and Form Designer used by the administrator as you're designing the forms using that. They can both be launched separately as well as from CODESOFT or LABELVIEW. The nice thing about this is that Form Viewer really puts up a boundary between printing the label and designing the label. Network administrators can even ensure that only the Form Viewer software is available to the print users. Another difference is that forms created in Form Designer can have a one-to-many approach, in that one form can print multiple label templates, as well as even launch other forms. And lastly, because it's so highly customizable, Form Designer is an add-on for LABELVIEW and CODESOFT. Now, where Form Designer had Form Viewer, a separate application, Form Editor's counterpart is the form within the label design software. So this form is launched from CODESOFT or LABELVIEW. Where Form Designer can print one-to-one or one-to-many, the Form Editor can only be related to one label template. However, it is built into CODESOFT and LABELVIEW as it's a standard feature of the software, not an add-on. Now, regarding the enhancements for Form Designer and Form Editor, Form Designer has been a functional add-on for many, many years. So the enhancements in 2019 were really minor fixes and improvements. However, Form Editor is a completely new feature, adds a ton of functionality to the print time forms that are built into CODESOFT and LABELVIEW. Another enhancement that really is going to complement Form Editor is the ability to default to the Form tab rather than the General tab as it did in previous versions. Now, just a few tips if you need help deciding on whether to go with Form Designer or Form Editor. If you don't want your print users launching the label design software, or if you would like the users to enter specific data to pull a predefined label template, you'll want to use Form Designer. Form Designer is also a good choice if you're looking for that one-to-many scenario where you can have a single form, and from that form you can print multiple label templates. And if you're okay with your print users launching the label designer, but would like a more customized printing approach where you can still set up specialized data entry fields, Form Editor is going to be the best choice for you. So we're just about ready to start the live training demo. And for this, I just want to point out that all the folders in CODESOFT and Form Designer are defaulted. We're using the default folders. Nothing's been changed. We'll be using the sample labels, the sample images, everything that gets installed with the software. So nothing's really been customized on our end. I'm doing this just so that if you need to use this video at a later time, you can kind of follow along without any modification on your end outside of installing and activating the software. So we're actually going to start by creating a one-to-many form in Form Designer. Actually spending most of our time in Form Designer just because all of the objects that we're adding to our forms are also available in Form Editor, and it would just be silly to repeat myself. But we'll finish off in Form Editor, just kind of showing you around and how to use it. And then at the very end, we'll show you what using a Form Editor form in Form Designer would look like. So I'm first going to launch the Form Designer software. We can actually launch this right through our Start menu. So if you have it installed on your end, you can just go to Start, All Programs, go down to the T's for TEKLYNX, whether it's CODESOFT or LABELVIEW, and you'll see a separate shortcut for Form Designer, and this is what's going to pop up. Now, before we get started on that one-to-many form, I want to show you how simple it is to create a one-to-one form. It's very, very simple. We would actually just use a wizard for that. You would use the File dropdown, go to New, choose one of the predefined forms. We'll see the Create New Form pop up. It's prompting us for a form name. I'm not feeling very creative, so we're going to put in Test here, and it's prompting us to select an individual label. So we're going to click on the ellipsis here. It's going to show us our default folders in CODESOFT. And I'll just grab the identity label. Should be pretty familiar to you if you've watched the basic and advanced webinars. So we'll click Open, and then we'll click Next, So it's showing us all of the variables in that label template. And we have a few optional elements to add. We can display a label preview, select printer button, and label quantity to print field. So we're going to check all of these. We're going to click next. Some cosmetic settings, how we want this displayed as a text field or in a grid. We'll keep everything as is, click finish. And it has now created a one-to-one form for us. There's one thing I want to point out. Under the view dropdown, we have a designer mode and an execution mode. We're in designer mode right now as we're kind of designing the form. Execution mode is actually what the form is going to look like in the form viewer software. So if we are sort of in the middle of building it, we want to see how some of the logic is going to work out, what it's going to look like to the end user or the print user. We can hit the F4 key or choose this. We'll choose execution, and this is what the end user would be seeing. So again, very, very simple to create one of those one-to-one forms. I'm just going to go to File and New. And we'll start with a blank form here. And now we're going to create a one-to-many form. Before we do that, I'm going to show you some of the objects we can be adding to this form. We have labels. Generally, this is going to be static text. Maybe you have a drop-down that displays the amount of print or the printers. You can label that as select your printer here. So usually it's going to be static data. Then we have link labels, hypertext fields. So it's if you want your company's web portal on the form, you can put that on there as a hyperlink. Buttons, just what it sounds like, clickable buttons. We have text boxes. This is where you can type in information. So maybe you want the form to prompt your print user for a quantity. They'd be able to type into a text box. Checkboxes, radio buttons, pretty binary. You're either checking these or toggling these on or off. Group boxes are purely cosmetic. It's just going to display a border on the form. So maybe you have a couple of buttons or a couple of options or labels on the form that are very similar, or they should be grouped together. You can put them in a group box. So again, just displays that border. List boxes and data grids are very similar. List boxes are just going to display something from a directory or a file. Same with data grid, it will display information from a file or a directory. Can also display the labels variables. Database grids, just what it sounds like, pulling information from a table. Combo boxes are going to be drop downs. Last two, we have our picture boxes just displaying an image on the label, and then preview is going to display a preview of the selected label. And in between the form and the objects, we have the form properties. Whatever is highlighted, whether it's the form itself, it will show us the properties in this window. If we have some other object on the label and we highlight that, we'll see that object's properties. So right away, we're going to have form highlighted. We're taking a look at the form properties. Just going to make this form a little bit bigger. We can make it look as good or basic as we want. So rather than having it look pretty blocky, we're going to add a background image right away, just kind of jazz it up for our print users. We can add a file from our predefined images. We can make sure that's stretched to be the entirety of the form. And when our end user or print users launch this, it's just going to say form. So maybe we want to change that to say something like printing portal. Now, we're going to be creating a one-to-many form, but rather than using the wizard, if you wanted to create a one-to-one form, we see there is an attached label section. If we click on this drop-down, we have a radio button for fixed and then variable. If we just keep it at fixed and maybe choose the identity label again, that's how you're creating the one-to-one form. So if I click OK here, this form is connected to the identity label. We can see under variables, it is now populated with 7 variables. The form's automatically going to pull in the labels variables down here just so they can be used in some of the other objects. I'm going to actually add 3 form variables. Just kind of get that out of the way, and we'll see those in use a little bit later once we're adding more objects onto this form. I'm going to create a selected printer variable. I'm going to create a label quantity variable. I'm just going to default that value to 1. And then I'm going to create a selected label variable. We can leave this default blank. I'm going to put in the identity label just so that when we display a preview, there is something displayed there. So these are all the form variables we're going to need. We're going to click OK. We'll see that 7 go up to 10. I'm actually now going to change the attached label to a variable. We're going to choose one of our form variables. It's the selected label. We'll click OK now. So our form's all set up. Now we need to start adding objects onto it. First thing I'm going to add is going to be a preview. We'll make that bigger. And one thing I like to do with a lot of the objects is really clean them up so it looks better for our print users. I like to actually make the background transparent. So we're going to highlight background color, jump over to the web tab, choose transparent. That's really going to clean that up. And we can also disable the border for this object so it looks better. So this one-to-many form, it has a preview now, but now we need a list box. And this is going to allow us to choose which label we want to print. So we're going to drag and drop a list box onto this form. Make this a little bit bigger. Keeping this highlighted, we're going to take a look at the properties. Under the data section, the type is set to text items. We're going to change that to directory. The folder we want it to pull from is empty, so we're going to switch that to the default samples directory. Again, if you have your own directory with your own labels, you just browse out to that directory instead. We'll click OK, and we're going to see that populate right away. A couple of different types of files in here. Label templates.lab files, .uld files. So the only thing we want our print users to see are the label templates. So we're going to change this filter so that it says star.lab. We'll only pull the label templates at this point. So now this object is pulling information from that directory, but we need to tell the form to do something with it. So we're going to change the variable type from fixed contents to variable contents for that object. We're going to change the value so that it is our selected label. And now if we go to view and execute, we'll be able to see what the end users are going to see. So now we can choose different label templates in this dropdown, and we're seeing it update on our form. So they can choose different label templates, but a lot of these labels have their own variables. Just like the identity label had 7 variables, some of these other labels have a number of variables associated with them. So when our print user chooses a label, we need them to modify some of that variable information as well. So we're going to pull a data grid onto our form. And this is actually going to be very simple. Right now, the type is set to text items. We're going to switch that to label variables. We're all set. That's all there is to it. The title is blank, so we could enter something like please enter data, so that our end user knows that they should be entering data right here. And again, if we launch that, we'll choose a different label. We can see this Samuelson variable, and we'll see that update in our preview. Going back into designer mode, we're going to add our first label onto this form. Again, label is just fixed data. We're just labeling something. So we want our end users to know that this is where they should be selecting their label. If we have this highlighted, we're going to keep type at fixed contents. We're going to change the value to select a label. Click out of that and we'll see that update. And a lot of these labels on the form, again, I like to clean up a little bit. So we're going to change the font. We'll make that bold. We'll change the size. And then we're also going to change that background color so that it is transparent. It's really going to clean that up. And again, because this is your customized form, maybe you want your own company logo on there, so we can place a picture box on there. By default, it's not pulling anything, so we're going to change the file name. It's going to go to that default icon or default directory for images. We'll just choose our TEKLYNX company logo. We're going to change the stretch mode so that it keeps the ratio. Now that we have a few objects on the label, if you hold that Shift key, you can highlight multiple objects. And now up at the very top, we have the alignment features. We're just going to left align everything. A few other objects to add onto this before it's all done. We're going to add 2 labels right away. We're going to be labeling our drop down for selecting a printer, and then where our print user is going to enter a quantity. So this very top one is going to read printer, and this bottom one is going to read quantity. And again, oops, I didn't spell that right. There we go. And again, you can highlight multiple objects and change the font in the background as well. So we're going to change the font so that it matches all the other labels. And then we're going to change that background so it matches. And left align. Okay. So we have 2 labels on our form. Now we need a drop-down box for the printer. And then we're going to use a text box for where our end user is going to type in the quantity. So let's get that combo box on. Put that close to our printer. We'll stretch that out a little bit. And if we take a look at the combo box properties, again, under the data section, the type is set to text items. We're going to change this drop-down so that we're pulling from a list of printers. And then we have 3 options for the printer's type. We have THT Windows and THT_ Windows. THT is going to pull only the internal drivers in CODESOFT and LABELVIEW. Windows will only pull drivers from the devices and printers list. THT_Windows will pull both. So this dropdown is now displaying a list of our printers, but we need to tie that into a form variable. So up at the top, we're going to change the type from fixed contents to variable contents, and we're going to change this value to selected printer. And we're all set with our combo box. Now we are going to add on a text box where the end user can type in the quantity. And here we're going to change the type from fixed contents to variable contents, and the value is going to be our label quantity. We're adding 1 more object onto this form. We're going to add a button because we're going to need to print from this. So this button right now just reads button. So we're going to change the value to read print. And again, we can make that maybe a little bit bigger so it's easier for our end users to see, and we can bold that as well. So now we have to assign actions to our print button. This is how we tell the buttons what to do. At the very bottom, you can see the actions list is empty. We're going to click on the Browse button. This is the action collection editor. This is how you're telling those buttons to do certain tasks. So we're actually going to right away add 2 tasks. When we click the print button, we want the form to use our selected printer and then actually print out our specified quantity. So this first action is really just going to be using that selected printer in our combo box. So over on the right, we can see a description. It's blank. We're going to use that drop down. We're looking for the select printer description. And below that, it has 1 parameter already. We're going to click on this ellipsis. And we can see that the action is set to fixed. We're going to change that to a variable, and we're going to have this pull from our selected printer. We're going to jump on to our second action. And now we want it to print. So we're going to change this description drop down to be print. We'll see 4 parameters pop up now. Click on this ellipsis. Really, the only one we're going to take a look at is label quantity. The rest is just copies of labels, copies of pages. So Keeping label quantity highlighted, we're going to change that type from fixed to variable, and we are going to choose label quantity. Click OK. We'll click OK out of this, and we're all set with our form. So now if I launch this form, we have a few printers in our dropdown. We can put in a quantity. We can choose a different label, modify some variable information. If we click print, should prompt for a PDF file. Yes, there we go. We'll create a test PDF file. I put it in quantity of 3 there. So if I save this, should be able to browse out to that directory now. There we go. Just pulled up my directories. We'll be able to launch this PDF file. And we'll see our labels printed. So again, highly customizable, very useful if you have multiple label templates with some when printed information, even pulling from a database. If you're a little bit worried about your end users modifying the actual label designs, create a form for them. All they do is launch the form. They'll be able to select their label, input their variable information, choose a printer, enter a quantity, click print. That's all they'll need to get printing. Now we're going to take a look at Form Editor. So we've been going over Form Designer. We're going to slide into Form Editor now. So I'm actually going to pull up the CODESOFT software. What I'm first going to do is again launch that identity label. Again, should be pretty familiar if you've watched the basic and the advanced webinars. So here's the default form when you're using our sample label. Some very simple when printed fields. So this is what we've seen in that basic and the advanced webinar, and we can really, again, make a lot of the exact same changes to this form within CODESOFT that we just did with Form Designer. Now, to actually enable editing of the form, we need to right-click on the form, choose Form Settings. By default, the form mode is going to be set to automatic. We need to switch that to custom. And I really like to check this checkbox, print when enter key is pressed. So when your end user is just going through and entering some of the data, they just have to hit enter and it will print out the label. So if we check this off, we'll click OK. And we're actually going to see the form go blank now. We need to start editing it. So we're going to right click on the form, choose Edit Form. And we'll see the form editor launched. Now again, a lot of the exact same options. So we have text input, a date picker that's actually very new. It's going to launch a calendar, and I'll show you that in a moment. A lot of the binary options, moving up, down, checkboxes, radio buttons, list fields, grid fields, time pickers, sliding bars, adding images, getting captures, and adding text boxes onto the form. So a lot of the exact same options from Form Designer is going to be in Form Editor. Again, that main difference is that one is launched within CODESOFT, one is launched from Form Viewer. Again, Form Viewer is that boundary. Form Viewer is the only one that your end user or print user will be launching. So we're going to pull up some pre-created forms for you. We're going to go back to the Open button, and we're going to see in the samples directory, we have a folder for custom forms. We're going to pull up that exact same identity label. Just has a unique form now. So exact same label, same one that we just had up, same one that we use in the basic and the advanced webinars. Now it just has a form, that we've modified the form for it. So it looks quite a bit better. Again, when printed fields, we can change the color, have the up-down options. We have the date picker. So we can actually display the calendar. And your end user or your print user is not going to be able to, at least from this window, be able to click and drag some of the objects away. So this is not customizable until you right-click on that form and choose Edit Form. So once you do that, we're going to get into the form editor, and now you can actually modify this form. Now you can sort of negate that by enabling password protection in the software. In the advanced webinars, we go through some of the security features of CODESOFT and LABELVIEW. You can add document level passwords, so you can have an administrative password. You can also have a print user password or a print only password. So if you enable those, they wouldn't be able to modify the form. Just to pull up another customized form from Form Editor, we're going to pull up the, again, the exact same label, just with a different form. So this one's actually pulling from a database. It's a very useful tool if you want to change what your print user is seeing at print time. If you want to kind of filter some of the input or draw attention to specific fields, you can do that through Form Editor and Form Designer. So these labels have been modified. The forms have been modified. We can also take these labels that have unique forms and link them into link them into the Form Designer. If we want to do something like that, we can pull back up Form Designer. We have a predefined, pre-created form called Label Select. And just taking a look at this form we can see is pulling from one label. I'm sorry, a variable called label name. It's the only variable in there. We have a data grid. We have a preview. And we have one button with one action. And that action is not to actually print. It's just to show the print dialog box. So it's actually going to display the simple print window from CODESOFT or LABELVIEW. So we're not assigning actions to print or select a printer. It's all going to be done from that form that we launch by clicking print. So if we actually launch this, we'll be able to pick a label. We'll be able to click print. It's going to show our form. This one's pretty big, so we'll stretch that out a little bit. And really, we're printing through the form editor form now. We're just using the form viewer form to launch this. So you can use both in conjunction. So I believe we've gone through everything we're going to take a look at in the demonstration. I hope this really kind of illustrates the usage of Form Design and Form Viewer and when you might want one over the other. Just going to slide into a recap. Just to reiterate, so using forms, it's going to add security. It's going to reduce errors. The print user is not really launching the software itself, the design software with Form Designer. With Form Editor, again, you can lock that out using the password, the design password. Form Designer is, again, launched separately. Form Editor is going to be launched from within the software, but again, you can negate the end users modifying that by using that password. You can also create that two-step printing process by using both. We just illustrated that. Enhanced Form Editor is only going to be available in LABELVIEW and CODESOFT 2019. And lastly, we are here to help you design your ideal printing process. In fact, we're going to take a short poll before we slide into our question and answer section. Should be populating on your end now. And we're just launching this because we're really excited about what forms can do for our customers. So, I mean, if you're interested in using it, certainly upgrade. We can help you out with that. We're really looking to just capture interest for anyone looking to upgrade. If you want to use forms, but just don't have the time or the resources to set them up yourself, We certainly offer services to help you create your labels, as well as the forms. And again, that's because if you do need that form editor, if you're looking for that form editor, that's only available in the 2019. Just give a couple more moments for this poll, then we'll close it down and slide into the question and answer section. All right, closing that down, taking a look at some of these questions that the moderators have been going over. Okay, I've just been reviewing some of these questions. There was a question that popped up: can I pull the label and form data from a database and ask to just print or view the label? Yeah, that would be used with a data grid. Let's pull up the form design software again. All right, there we go. I'm just closing down the last form I had up, starting with a fresh one. So if you're looking to pull information from a database, it's actually going to be very similar to what we just did. We would need, so if you're pulling from a database, let's link this form into our identity label as it's pulling from a database. You're looking to have a preview on the label. This is a one-to-one form. We want that database grid on the label. You can see once we have the grid highlighted, we're seeing the connection settings. We'll be using the identity connection that's built into the software, the table we're pulling from, any filter. So right now this is pulling from the database. We're actually seeing the database that's linked into this label template. We can actually see the first record, Doris Samuelson, pop up right there. And if the only option you want is to print, we can place that button on there. And really we can take away the select printer option. I should take that back. We still need that select printer option. We would just default it to a very specific printer. So under select printer, when we modified it to be a variable earlier, we can switch it to a fixed printer. Under action, that would be our same print. So we're going to choose print and keep everything else as is. We can certainly add the quantity section just like we did. So it's a fairly simple form. We went through all the same features as we were creating the one-to-many form. We're just taking away some of the features, it seems like. There was a question about how can you modify some of the input. If we add a text box, just like we did for that quantity section, we have input masks. Pound signs are going to be numbers. @ symbols will be letters. So if we put in 2 numbers here for our quantity, they would only be able to enter in 2 digits, 2 numbers. They wouldn't be able to type anything else other than those 2 numbers in there. So yeah, we can limit what is typed into the form. Looks like our moderators are asking or answering quite a few of the questions. Just seeing if there's anything we need to kind of showcase within form design. Question I recently heard about ClickPrint. Does that work with this? It's similar in that you're not exactly launching the CODESOFT or LABELVIEW software. It's going to show you a bunch of thumbnails. So ClickPrint will display from a directory, and we'll show you some thumbnails of the selected labels in that directory. You can click on the thumbnail, and then it would launch the simple print window. That simple print window can be modified, kind of like what we showed when we're using both. So if you modify the form using Form Editor, when you use ClickPrint and launch that form, you would see the edited form. Again, just taking a look at some of these questions that are popping up. Question popped up. When would you use Central instead of LABELVIEW 2019? Central is really our enterprise. Well, it's a grouping of our enterprise products. It's going to combine the Sentinel software, which is going to automate the print process. It's going to combine LabelNet, which is a web portal. It's also going to combine Label Archive, which can do a number of things. It's really if you want to have a three-step approval process where a label designer would design the label, it would be submitted for approval to a supervisor. The supervisor would accept or reject it. If it was accepted, it would become available within the interface for print. If it was rejected, it would get sent back. You can add comments. It has a heavy audit trail. It keeps versions of the label templates. Maybe you need to meet CFR 20 compliance or create some JHS labels. So it's Central just takes all of those enterprise products, puts it into one grouping so that you can launch it through a central location. LABELVIEW is not really going to automate the print process. It's not going to have those three-step approval processes. You're not going to be able to print through a web portal. So quite a few different reasons why you would upgrade from LABELVIEW to Central. Central is also going to use our CODESOFT software. However, going from LABELVIEW to CODESOFT is almost seamless. Again, sliding over into the question section here. Sorry for the pauses here. I'm just reading through all these questions. We do have quite a few of them. question about, speaking of conversions, being on a LABELVIEW Gold version 8.6, switching up to or upgrading to the 2018 or 2019. It's a bit of an older version. The user interface has changed, so there would be a bit of a learning curve as to just where some of the features are. And I want to say there's been quite a few versions since then, 9, 10, 2012, 2014, 2015, 16, 18, and 19. And we do have to push them out. GS1 is going to always be updating its standards. You know, Windows or Microsoft is always pushing out new operating systems. We're always getting new feature sets for the software. So we're always just rolling out with new versions. And we do have built-in converters for even going from older ones like that, version 8.6 up into the 2018 or 2019 products. Now, there was a follow-up to that, referring to using older DBF files. Microsoft stopped supporting those, so we sort of followed suit. DBF files can be linked into the software. However, with some of our older products, when DBF files were still supported, we built into the software that you can modify or write back to those DBF files. Really not a out-of-the-box kind of thing at this point. We do recommend switching from DBF to Excel, maybe even Access. Excel is by far the easiest. DBF files open up directly in Excel. You can just take any existing DBF file within Excel, do a file open up the DBF file, and then just do a file save, and then all of a sudden all your data is in an Excel file. So it's pretty easy transition. While I was talking about that, some questions popped up. I'm just going to slide over and take a look at them again. All right, a lot of these questions are tying back to pricing, best places to get more information. Nothing that looks like I would really be displaying in the form designer, form editor. We're going to start wrapping this up. I just want to let you know that we do have the contact information for some of these questions, and that we are going to follow up with any of the remaining questions after the webinar. So if you can think of anything, pop it in there. We will certainly reach out to you. Just want to reiterate, if you have any questions at all on how the best process for upgrading, just starting to look at form designer, form editor, you can always reach out to us. That's exactly what we're here for. All right, I just want to thank you all for joining me on this Forms and Form Editor topical webinar. As I said, if there are any remaining questions, we do have the contact information, so we will reach out to you. And I hope you all have a good rest of your afternoon.